want to talk? So let's talk. Here. Talk. You want to talk? You gotta talk, you need to talk. News talk.
I talk, you talk to Solomon. I talk, you talk to Solomon. Yeah, let's talk to Solomon. Talk to Solomon.
You gotta talk, you want to
Welcome to Talk to Solomon with Dr. Alan Keyes, a lady who's running for the United States Senate. She's a Harvard professor. Her name is Elizabeth Warren, has been caught. Now, she doesn't think it's a problem. Dems don't think it's a problem. But I think it's a major problem. She's lying through her teeth because allegedly someone thought that someone's great something or another was an American Indian with no proof, by the way, and no documentation. That 1/32nd possibility allowed her to get money based on that presumption. And of course, then she came back with the classic, well, I have high cheekbones, that must mean something. Now, this, again, is one of those Oprah Winfrey moments that it's not that important, but whether or not this woman will be in the United States Senate representing a state having 1/100th of the decision on every decision made by the United States Senate, to me is an issue. Whether or not we like our system or we don't, whether we think it's honest or dishonest, we still have to deal with what's there. Now, Alan, should this woman be charged with a crime for fraud? Certainly her opponent's jumping on it now, but he was slow to. I don't know exactly who uncovered all this, but it just blows my mind, like the earlier statement, even though our system is abusive, that we have got to get past this not saying, you know, poop if we have a mouthful. I just think we have to speak up. Your thoughts?
Well, Stan, I think it's important to reestablish that trying at least to be straight with the public when you're running for office ought to be one of the prerequisites for people supporting you. But I don't know, Stan. I look at what has become the way of doing business in this entire political process, and I wonder how much credibility the folks who are actually running out there, participating in this system, can have when they call somebody else on their playing fast and loose with the truth, but are perfectly willing to be silent while somebody they support on their own side is fast and loose with the truth. So if the Republican opponent there of Warren is going to make a big issue because she didn't tell the truth about her resume, I mean, I'm told that the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party, the former governor of Massachusetts, maybe it's part of the culture there, I don't know. He goes around the country talking about his record on family and a staunch supporter of life and against gay marriage and all this. And it's all nonsense. It's all lies. His record totally contradicts it. She's telling a lie about her heritage. He goes around telling lies about his record. The Republican opponent shall call her on her heritage lies, but God forbid that he should call Romney on the lies he tells about his record. And I'm not doing this to just beat up on people and candidates and all this stuff. It's to point to the fact that in a country founded on the notion of self-evident truths, we have allowed a political process to develop in which there is no respect for truth. There is only respect for victory. Do whatever it takes to win. And so if you have to tell the truth about your opponent who's lying, then you go ahead and do that. But if you refuse to tell the truth about somebody you want to win who's lying, well, you do that because that'll get you winning. That's not integrity, Stan, and people can't take that seriously. If you care about the truth, if you really believe that it's in the best interest of the voters, that folks should be straight about their record and straight about their things they have done, and straight in dealing with this and that and the other thing, then you should be across the board in that way. And it shouldn't be tolerated that when it's to your political advantage, you back people who aren't telling the truth. And when it's to your political advantage, you criticize people who aren't telling the truth. Because the only thing that matters in this country is partisanship. That good information should get to the people, that they should have real choices that they can make with some integrity. That doesn't matter to you. The only thing that matters is who wins and who loses. And if it helps you to win, then it's okay. And if it's going to make you lose, then you'll just shut up about it. I don't think that makes sense, Stan. So I do think we need to be concerned. But I don't think the way to restore that concern is to make sure that we jump on our opponents every time they lie. I think we also need to make sure that we are unwilling to be silent about folks who happen to share this or that partisan thing with us. Because the first thing that needs to be, I think, restored in this country is the notion that people ought to be a little bit more, I think, like the founders of America, who even against what they knew to be their own interest were willing to declare self-evident truths that condemned their ownership of slavery, that required that they should share power as aristocrats and elites with the people of the country. When you are willing to take a stand with integrity that's actually against your interest and against your partisanship, then I think people can begin to believe that you do so out of a real concern for the truth, a real respect for their right to hear it. But I don't think that's true in the present corrupt sickness that prevails in this so-called two-party sham. And until we have done what is necessary to somehow clean out the Augean stables of this diseased political process, I think it's going to be very difficult to listen to all these people at election time calling one another on their faults. I think of it every day, practically, Stan, as I watch people now who are stepping forward to make partisan use of the eligibility issue and other issues that people with great courage have had to stand up and try to get folks to listen to and understand the truth of. The people who did it when the winds were against them and people were ridiculing them, and the very folks who are now trying to abuse it for partisan purposes didn't have the guts to speak up. I respect those folks. But the people who are out there now seeking to exploit it for their partisan purposes, I think it just makes me sick. I don't know about anybody else, but it just shows me their lack of integrity, because when it only mattered to the Constitution, they shut up. But now that it matters to their political fortunes, they're willing to begin to say a little something about it, then about other things too. But I suppose at the end of the day, we have to take truth where we can get it right now, don't we, Stan?
Yep, that is absolutely true. Now, the Department of Homeland Security has let it be known, although I don't think they wanted to let it be known, that they are preparing for massive civil unrest in this country, not predicated on black and white, not predicated on North and South, not predicated on what you might think, the pro-life and pro-choice and those who believe in God and those who are lost, but rather on the fact they expect an economic collapse, because you have to be deaf, dumb, blind, and not inhale air to not understand this country is going 100 miles an hour into the side of a mountain with our economic policies. We simply will end up with currency that is worthless. And the rest of the world's recognized it. And now you have the Chinese and you have the Russians and you have the Arabs and others saying we need a currency that has value because the United States dollar has little and shortly will have no value. Your thoughts?
Well, Stan, I can understand why these folks would be taking these steps and trying to pretend it had something to do with some expected, I don't know, reaction from the American people that will require a massive clampdown. After all, if you're doing everything in your power to cause an economic collapse, wouldn't it be wonderful if you're like these Obama types or you're like these elite faction totalitarians to then be able to use the economic collapse you caused as an excuse to impose your totalitarian will on the country? That's exactly what I've been expecting them to do. And so I'm not surprised that they're now setting it up in such a way that well, this is what we're doing. We expect this economic collapse, and so we're prepared for the clampdown that's going to be required when the outrage and the riots and the this and that. Let me ask you a question, Stan. Do you think that scenario is credible? Now, let me see. on September 11th, 2001, several thousand people killed in America in an event that I think pretty much anywhere in the world would probably have caused a massive outpouring of public rage. Certainly in the Islamic world, in whether it's in the Near East or in Asia or anywhere, something like that, would have had people out in the street. They would have been hunting for folks to string up and kill and bloody in their deep anger and resentment and outrage and so forth and so on. Do you remember any such occurrences in this country, Stan? Do you remember that the terrible anger people felt and the rage that boiled up inside them then led them to go out and start looking for people to kill and tearing up everything? That's not how Americans behave. They're lying to themselves, or they're trying to convince us of a lie about ourselves. And I think it's about time we call them on it. Because I think if they're looking for some excuse to start mobilizing the forces, they're going to openly stomp on the liberty of our people, then they better find another excuse than our own lack of self-control, because we've demonstrated that even recently, okay, in ways that put the rest of the world to shame. And I'll say it because I'm proud of it. So I don't buy that particular scenario. I understand why they're trying to convince us of it, because it falls well in line with what I think are their sick machinations. But I don't think we ought to be taken in by it, Stan. The other side of it is, of course, that it is part and parcel, having caused the terrible crisis in economic terms, they are now going to try to tell us that clampdowns and control and who knows, God knows what, are going to be necessary so that we can deal with the terrible consequences and all of this. It's not necessary in America. What would be really necessary to get us out of all this mess would be to remove all these totalitarian-minded people from the precincts of government, wherever they are, whatever party label they wear, and put back in place folks who will respect the self-control, the faith, the decency, the initiative, the enterprise of the good people of the United States. That's what I think. And instead of preparing to stomp all over us, they ought to be preparing to get out of our way. And frankly, I think that's what we ought to be insisting on.
I would hope that we would do that in a number of ways. Now, to kind of close out the evening on government of the people, by the people, and for the people being interesting but not in existence anymore, we now have the federal government saying they have to do something about obesity. It's affecting 42% of the people by the year 2020 or 20-something or another, 2030, that they're going to outlaw plastic bags, that they're going to just basically, well, they've outlawed bake sales. We need the government, they think, more as opposed to less. I mean, you've just alluded to it, but I think that people need to understand that, you know, where it used to be, we hope they won't notice, now it's, we don't give a darn if they notice. We're going to impose and we're going to create and we're going to remake America in their image.
Yeah, sadly, I think that's exactly right, Stan. I think that this totalitarian mentality is going to be exploiting every possible excuse to pretend that there must be a pervasive surveillance and influence and control and regulation by government of every facet of our lives. Here, however, Stan, I think, is the hard truth about how we, I think, must behave, what we must do if we're going to avoid that path. And if you don't want a government that controls you, begin by controlling yourself. If you don't want to be governed by tyrants, then remember to be governed by God and the conscience that He has put within you for that government. Because what we should be trying to restore, Stan, is not just a situation where there's less government and less control and less regulation and so forth. The key to the whole way of life that our founders envisaged and that I think was working in various ways, even in face of great difficulties in this country, was that word that was often used and ought still to be used to describe the form of government we're supposed to have: constitutional self-government. Constitutional implying that there are rules, that there are procedures that we're going to respect, that we're going to impose upon ourselves. And self-government meaning that the principle is not that the government shall do for us, but that we shall do for ourselves, beginning with what we do to make sure we meet our responsibilities and obligations and control and discipline ourselves in the ways that are necessary for the peace and order and prosperity of our communities. I'm sad every time I think of how that ideal of self-government has slipped away from the rhetoric and understanding of the American people. And it's all about government doing this and government doing that, needs being met in this way, needs being met in that way, and so little about getting people to remember that the real root of liberty is what they are willing to take on in the way of their own responsibilities and to meet in the way of their own obligations and to pursue in the way of their own capacity to realize for themselves and families and communities the dreams that they have. Government was not, under that understanding, supposed to be an instrument that substituted for our own prudence and common sense and discipline and character, but an instrument that, in the limited ways necessary to protect and facilitate our community, to protect our rights, to protect us from those who would not accept that discipline of self-government, government was to be empowered by us to take action and to make laws and to follow policies that, however, were not intended to force us to do wrong and prevent us from doing right. But neither were they expected to substitute for our willingness by our own volition rightly to do the things that God requires of us. I think if we can get back to that understanding of self-government, Stan, if we make that our goal, then I think the business of finally getting the government back under control will be so much easier when we have learned once again that that control ought first to begin with our control of ourselves.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. We probably should end on that note before I say something that undoes it. But we really are dealing with a paradigm shift in not only how America is viewed by others, but how America is viewed by America. And where we used to congratulate and shower praise and adulation on those who played by the rules, who obeyed the laws, who worked hard, who pulled themselves up, who supported their families, who loved their country, who volunteered their time, that's all gone. Now we make heroes out of people who defecate on police cars, who curse rather than converse, that demean God and country, and for, I guess, apple pie too, throw that in there. And it's the question becomes, and you alluded to it, Alan, and we'll finish on this with your comment, can America survive itself? Stuff out there we can deal with. Can we survive ourselves? Can we survive the move to the godless side, the move to the dark side? Because if we don't survive that, everything else is not going to work.
I don't think we can survive it. I noticed a column at WorldNet Daily today by Tom Sowell, or yesterday, about talking about the moral infrastructure and how we really can't hope to maintain any decent way of life if we allow the collapse of it in the very ways that you were talking about. And when I was reading the column, I remember thinking to myself, because he talked about obeying the laws and so forth, and I said to myself, you know, we are now at a time when you look at the way the pretense and pretext of law is being abused, when I think we have to be a people that looks beyond the formal understanding of law to the understanding of right, which is to say of justice as endowed by God, and how we as individuals must take on our responsibility for right. Sometimes that might mean going to Notre Dame and stand and witness for a truth about justice that the law is now being abused to violate, and going to jail. And other times it will be in recognizing that those who are mindlessly violating the law to destroy our communities in the name of something that they call justice are in fact abusing the understanding of right rather than serving it. And I think we really need to get back to and really start to work on understanding what the founders saw when they were putting together the Constitution, when they were trying to give people a sense of the limits that there ought to be on folks as they exercise government power. They didn't impose those limits for the sake of law, Stan. They imposed them for the sake of right, for the sake of justice, and their understanding of that justice they took from their faith in Almighty God and their understanding of His will. And that's what I think we had best get back to.
Amen, agree, and adieu. Or I'm trying to say in French, goodbye. But thank you, Alan. Appreciate your time. Thank you, America.
You're welcome, Stan.
We love you, and we hope that you love yourself enough to turn to God and not to Satan. Good night, America.
Mm-mm.